today, and any tech queries or introducing yourselves, please put that in the chat. So my name's Aglionby, and I'm the Executive Director of the Foundation for Common Land, and I'm managing this SFI Moorland test and trial. So this is funded by Defra, and the purpose of this is to road test the SFI Moorland Introductory standard. And this evening we're going to share our experiences, how far we've got. We just started this in August, so it's all fairly soon, and we're going to be doing another webinar at the end. So before we start, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a policy update. Really, the policy update is fairly blank because we're waiting for the ELM review to be completed, and latest information is that is expected this side of Christmas. We're expecting not till after the budget, but at the moment, in terms of the uplands, what's available for the uplands is really SFI Moorland. If you've got improved grassland, you may be able to go into the SFI improved grassland, but this is the primary offer for the uplands, and we're expecting other SFI options for the uplands to be available in probably not till 2024. Countryside stewardship is still available for those who would like to take that option. Coming back to SFI Moorland Introductory Standard, although this was launched in June for Commons, it's not yet available to apply directly through rural payments, but it is just being launched for 18 test commons. So RPA are working with commons, and if you are interested in your common and going into SFI Moorland, I would encourage you to ring the RPA or send them an email and express your interest, and then you may be in the next batch. But please don't worry about the timings, because it's a 3-year scheme, and it doesn't really matter whether you start, in December, in January, February next year sometime, because it'll just run for a set 3 years, but it doesn't matter when those 3 years start. So just for those who aren't familiar with the Moorland Introductory Standard, just to give you a little bit of background, there are no land management actions required, no stocking restrictions required. So you don't have to make any changes to your current active management. You're being paid to survey the common, to identify the public goods on the common, and to plan opportunities for managing those public goods. And also you can stack this on top of a countryside stewardship or an HLS agreement if you've got those one running at the moment. So this is money on top of that. The payment rate for commons is £16.45 per hectare per year, and it runs for 3 years. If you're looking at moorland that isn't common land, or it's common land with only one beneficiary, that means, for instance, there are no common rights, then you get paid £10.30 per hectare. In terms of this session, the first part of it will be really mostly about what happens on commons. The second part, the Land app, we're working in collaboration with the Land app. Their survey tool is just as suitable for moorland that isn't common land as well as common land. So moving on to, sorry, the screen is so in terms of what we're running in terms of this road testing, we are undertaking the SFI as if for real. So Defra have provided the £16.45. They're providing it in 4 quarterly chunks to 3 commons associations. So we have Brantfell in Cumbria, that's just near Sedbergh. We have Longmynd in Shropshire near Church Stretton, and we have Peter Tavy in Dartmoor. And those are the 3 commons which we are working with. They're being paid the full rate for the task, and in addition, they're having support from a local facilitator, and you'll meet the facilitators in a moment. The Foundation for Common Land is providing template letters for sending out to people. They're providing a template internal agreement and the digital tools which are being developed by the Land app. So all of those are being tested for real as we go through this 1 year. And then we'll be disseminating the results, and we'll be making all those tools available to you on our online toolkit. So our toolkit, if you haven't found it yet, you go to our website, foundationforcommonland.org.uk, and in the top right-hand corner, there's a purple button. If you click on that, that'll take you to the toolkit. We haven't yet got all the resources up there, but we will be putting more up. But there is introduction to SFI Moorland already. So coming back to tonight's webinar, we'll first have a session from Viv Lewis about the pre-application steps. We will then have Sam McAlister talking about preparing the actual internal agreement. Sam's a solicitor. We'll then have Dan Geerah demonstrating the digital tools. And then we're going to have a conversation where the local facilitators and the commoners talking to each other and a bit about the couple of commons. Now, I'm meant to be running an introductory poll to find out who's with us. So we're going to stop sharing. And if we could have that first, the first poll, that would be great. So do fill this in. If you fit more than one of the categories, choose the one you'd like to identify as. Excellent. We've had most of the people respond. So shall we close the poll now? So if we share the results of that, so that's very good to see. We've got 44% of the people on the call are farmers, 18% are farm advisors, 3% academics, 7% own common land, 14% are land agents, 17% are common secretary or chairs, and 5% from people, 4% from environmental NGOs, 11% from the public sector, 2 policymakers, and we've got 18 others. So lovely to have you all with us this evening. We'll be capturing all this information. It's really great to have a wide range of people here this evening. So thank you very much for that. So very good. Okay, so now before we go any for now, the next stage of the webinar, I'd like to introduce Viv. So Viv, would you like to come onto the screen? And Viv Lewis is our is known to many people in the common world because she's one of her many roles is administrator of the Federation of Cumbrian Commoners, but she's working in a personal capacity in this particular project and is the local facilitator for Brant Fell. So lovely to have you with us, Viv, and you're going to take us through the first bit of the process.
Yes, I will. It was great to see so many people here tonight. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, so just bear with me. I hope that this is going to work. So it's be able to get my PowerPoint up onto this screen. Hang on. Right, from the beginning. Can people see the screen now?
No.
Right, what's gone wrong here?
We can.
Let me just get back to share screen. Screen 2, share. Can you see it? Oh, yes. Brilliant. Excellent. That's the nervous bit over. Sorry, everybody. Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's required of a Commons Association and what you must have. I mean, I'm sure these are things that you are aware of, but to enter common land into an SFI, you must have a...
Viv, there's some sound on your... There's a feedback on your...
audio. Okay, is that better?
Can we just check in all the participants have the sound? Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll start again. So what I'm looking at the must-haves before you can actually make an application to SFI. you have to have a single entity in Defra speak, which is basically, for most people, it'll be a commoners association. And if you have a commoners association already, it might be a good time to actually review your constitution to see if it's still fit for purpose. Because a lot of commons associations, you've been in HLSs or even before that, ESAs or countryside stewardships. So some of these constitutions might be 10, 15, 20 years old. So it's quite good to look at how, if it still works well. There are some tools on the foundation toolkit which will help you look at that. You need SBIs and field parcels. You need a bank account. These are all things that most of you will have. You need sufficient management control for 3 years and an enforceable internal agreement. And these are the last two of the bullet points we'll be looking at in more detail. Right. I need to move on. Sorry, I'm just right. I'm move my slide on. I think that's. Is that the slides moved on now? Has it?
Yes.
Right. Sorry, just being a bit cat-handed here. So what does sufficient management control mean, or how do you demonstrate that to Defra? Well, the main thing is you need to get your registers up to date. Dartmoor has an advantage over the rest of us because of Dartmoor's Commons Council, where you have live registers, but most of us don't have them. So we need to get our registers up to date. And that means that you can contact all the known common rights holders and those that have easements and covenants on the common, because you need to write to them and tell from the association and tell them that the association is intending to apply for SFI. And this can be quite a big job. It depends on the size of your common. And I'm going to explain a little bit about how we are doing it through this test and trial. Now, there are, as they say, there are other ways to do it, but this is how we are doing it. And this is what we're testing. You need to start with the official registers. And I'm sure most of you will know about the official registers, which you get from your local authority. You can just ring them up and they'll send you an electronic version. The picture on the left is a picture of the Register of Brantfell. These registers were opened in 65, well, a bit later on. And if you look at the page, often some of the first entries in the register often have changed and they're crossed out. What you need to do is transpose the register to an Excel spreadsheet. Go away. Sorry, I've just been offered some refreshments, which is really nice. So you transpose it to an Excel spreadsheet. We've decided to use Excel spreadsheets because you can then use mail merge. Now, some of you might not be familiar with that, but it is probably the best way to do it. And there are a lot of templates, again, in the toolkit that you can look at. So if you look at the picture on the right, this is actually copying out everything from the spreadsheet, from the register into a spreadsheet. It takes a bit of time, but actually then it means you can work with it very easily. Once you've done that, you need to sort the data because there's a lot of entries that are actually now not valid. So you then get a list of actually everybody that you can send a letter to. So you send out the letters to the valid entries. And because a lot have been cancelled and replaced, you won't necessarily be sending out that many letters. And just to show you what we've done for Brant and for Longmynd, next slide. Here's what we've got, where we've got to. Dartmoor, as I mentioned, already has a live register. On Brantfell, which is the one I'm working at, there are actually 276 entries in the Commons register. So there were 276 entries in the Excel spreadsheet. Of these, 148 entries were valid. The rest were cancelled or replaced. And then we found, even though 148 entries that are valid, there in fact were only 68 rights holders, because quite a lot of the rights holders have more than one entry. So in the end, we sent out letters to 68 rights owners. And some of these would be active graziers, some would be non-graziers, some of them would actually be people that we weren't quite sure of because we didn't have the address of, but we sent out to, to the owner of the rights. And we sent out letters explaining that the association was considering entering in an SFI. We also sent out a form which included what we thought, which rights we thought they had, and asked them to check them and to send them back to us in a stamped addressed envelope. I sent that out about 2 weeks ago, and I've had 30 responses so far and 12 with corrections. And we've actually discovered 4 new owners of common rights which weren't in the register, because the registers aren't often up to date. And in Longmynd, which is a fairly similar size to Brantfell's 2,700 hectares. Longmynd's about 2,200, I think. There were 254 entries, 129 were valid. They had 110 rights owners. Again, some have multiple entries. And so far they've had 41 responses. And these are ones have been predominantly people correcting contact details or Royal Mail saying return to sender, addressee unknown, because as I've mentioned before, they aren't up to date, the registers. So hopefully we will, we probably will never get back 100% responses to our letters, but we know that we will continue to update the live register and actually uncover things which people didn't know about. So that's my bit about the registers, but the information will be available in the toolkit, and I hope it doesn't sound too out-facing to you, because actually it's not that difficult. It's just, it takes a bit of time and you have to be quite sort of accurate in what you do. Okay, that's my slides. Thank you.
Great, Viv. Thank you very much. I should hasten to add that you also contact the common land owner as well. So the common land owner, most people know who the common land owner is, and hopefully they're part of your association as well, so they're actively engaged. But if they didn't happen to be engaged, then you would include them as well in a special letter. But you'll be having association meetings about this as well, and including them.
I mean, in our case, in fact, the common landowner hasn't responded yet, but I hope he will.
Yeah, he has been to some of our meetings, so hopefully he'll engage. What we should stress is that you don't need to hear from people. The SFI doesn't require the consent of anybody. The association is the applicant. It has to be a single entity who is the applicant. If you already have a CS agreement or an HLS agreement, it has to be the same entity as holds the HLS or the CS agreement. So you can't have a separate body set up. So you don't want to clash between the CS and the HLS agreement. So, it's not like someone can go solo on this and fly solo and apply for the money without the association. But if any particular commoner decides not to participate, that's fine. If the owner decides not to participate, that's up to them as well. But one's encouraging people, those who are actively engaged in management. It is a farming scheme, sustainable farming scheme. It is for BPS applicants, but that's it's about making sure everyone knows what's going on. It's also really helpful to do this, because then when you want to apply for any future scheme, you do have this information available to you. Having a live register is really important. There was a question in the chat, is this really expensive? This is why Commons are receiving an extra £6.50 a hectare. But to do this work, you don't have to do it every year, but you get the £6.50 a hectare supplement every year. So that's why that cost is recognised. And we worked really hard to get that uplift. So I'd now like to hand us on the next stage. Once you've done this and you've decided you're going in, is before you apply, you must have a legally enforceable formal written agreement between the parties. So you cannot apply for the scheme before you have your internal agreement signed up. And that's something that you will have to confirm with the RPA before you're given a scheme. So I'd like to now invite Sam McAlister to join us. Sam is a solicitor who specialises in common land. She's based in Cumbria, and for those in the north of England, they may well have used her for their HLS or CS agreements. Welcome, Sam. Lovely to have you with us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. So I'm going to try and share my screen, and hopefully it'll all work. Share screen. That work? Can everyone see that? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to talk briefly about internal agreements, how to set up an agreement, and things that maybe it should include. So lots of people will be familiar with internal agreements. They've been used on commons for many years. We've had internal agreements for HLS, UELS and CS. The issue with commons is that multiple people have legal rights, and the internal agreement, the idea is it'll bring together that group of individuals and regulate their interactions to facilitate the scheme. And in theory, it should also promote good management of the common. There's no set format for a commons association, and there's no obligation to use a particular precedent or a solicitor. Historic schemes have been higher value, and therefore solicitors have tended to be used. But as sort of a slide in the future will say, that this is a lower value scheme. So the idea of the toolkit and the internal agreement that we're trying to put together with Foundation for Common Land is that it's a lower value scheme and you might not need a solicitor. Oh, lost my mouth. So the SFI requirements for Common Land, that you enter the scheme as a single entity, and you must, as Viv and Julia have both said, you must have a formal, legally enforceable internal arrangement for a group. That entity must have sufficient management control of the common to complete the required actions for the duration of the SFI agreement. And you must be able to deal with any breaches that might lead to the RPA recovering payment. So in terms of how to set up a binding internal agreement, it is just a contract between all interested parties. So in theory, it's just a piece of paper that everybody signs and dates. But in reality, it is a little bit more than that. The idea is that you establish the existence of an association or a group through the agreement, but lots and lots of commons will already have an entity, and the agreement itself for the SFI can just be sort of a bolt-on that works alongside your existing agreement. So what should the agreement contain? So we've put together already sort of a very draft internal agreement for SFI, and I've just sort of pulled out the headings to give you some idea of what we're trying to cover within an internal agreement. The SFI internal agreement should hopefully be shorter than the other schemes because of the nature of the SFI scheme, but it should contain information about the parties to the agreement, so who's going to sign it, who will be a member, background and definitions. A lot of the definitions may already be in a previous internal agreement and can be carried through. There might be some additional ones. Agreements by the members, so what is being agreed to and how long for, so just the duration of the SFI and perhaps what happens after that. You might still want an association, and that's something that's cropped up on historic internal agreements as well. Agreements by the signatories, so who is going to sign? Are all the graziers going to sign, just some of them? Is the owner going to sign? Anyone that is signing, you want them to say that they're going to comply with the scheme and the rules of the group. What's going to happen if someone transfers their rights? Do they need to tell the group? Historically, we've done sort of deeds of novation, moving obligations on to the new commoners. Whether or not that's necessary for your group is a question. Repayment of funds if needed, so if there's been a breach and the RPA asks for their money back, what's going to happen? Is the person who's breached going to be the one that pays? What information is going to be provided by the members? Email addresses, bank account details, an obligation to attend meetings and to contribute, and whether or not that works on every common is debatable, but it's something to think about. And then if you are getting the owner to sign, do they have the same obligations? And also it's sensible to ask or to put in the agreement that they are consenting to anything you need to do on the common as the owner. In terms of the next bit, we normally have agreements by the group. So that's by sort of the entity and what it's going to do. And the main thing the group's going to do is pay everybody, you'd hope. So payments to members, to third parties, insofar as there are any. It needs authority to pay expenses, and also is it going to retain any funds for anything? The group should also be obliged to fulfil the scheme before and after. So as I think Julia and Viv both touched on, there are certain things like the live register that need to be done before entering into the scheme, and this internal agreement should be in place before you enter the scheme. And therefore making the group and its members obliged to do certain things before and during and perhaps going on is required, and who's going to do it. Is it the officers? Is it certain graziers? Is it the owner? And how are they going to fulfil their obligations? There's usually a provision about keeping good accounts and how the group's going to be managed, or that it will be managed by the officers. Then usually a list of schedules. Usually there's a list of members. Obviously, if the live register has been done or is in progress, that's where that can sit. A list of rights, which goes along with the list of members. The payment schedule, which, although the agreement itself usually says that the money will be paid, the payment schedule says how and in what proportions and what does that look like. And then the rules. So in terms of the rules, a lot of commons will have a set of rules and a constitution from previous agreements, and that can just be reiterated. But if there isn't one, then you set out the objects, which be to sort of enter into and manage the SFI, who can be a member, can new graziers be members, who are the officers, giving them some form of indemnity against sort of group breaches so that they're not responsible for that, or they're not liable for that. How are meetings called and how are they run, and the decision-making process, so voting, quorum, things like that. Can the rules be changed? If so, how? Is it a simple majority, or do you need 75% of people agreeing, or unanimous agreement? And then general grazing rules, which would be specific to a common. So that's sort of largely the information that an internal agreement would contain. In terms of the precedent that we're trying to create, there's absolutely no obligation to use it at all. It will form part of the toolkit, and the reason we've put it together is that this is a lower value scheme, and employing a solicitor, as lots of people will know, can be expensive, and perhaps in this case prohibitively expensive. The precedent, the aim is it'll have options and gaps, which will have to be completed by the association or the group, and hopefully some guidance notes to accompany it. It may not work for all commons. Well, it won't. The reality is it won't work for all commons, and we can't be completely common specific, because if we do that, then it will work for less and it will grow and be longer and longer and try and cover all eventualities. But hopefully it'll work for most or some, or provide a starting point for lots of commons. The advice has to be, if you're in doubt, take advice, although the hope is that this will provide everyone with a starting point, or may just work for some people. If there is doubt, you do need to still take some advice from a land agent or from a solicitor. And as I think Julia mentioned, or maybe the internal agreement, it has to be in place beforehand. It doesn't have to be provided to the RPA, as I understand it, but you do need to supply a copy if requested. So it is important that you do have one. And yeah, I think that is it from me. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of internal agreements, but lots of you will have them and will know what they look like. I can see that someone has asked a question about if there is already an internal agreement for existing scheme, will it need to be modified? Not necessarily. The precedent, as we've created sort of the draft so far, it has options for if you've got an existing agreement. So the idea would be that you still did put in place an SFI internal agreement, but it was a bolt-on. We did them a lot with ULS, and after we've done like ELS ones, and it just bolted on and said, in addition to the things you're already doing, you're going to do this. So the hope is that there are some sort of extras that we've added in, because over time the internal agreements that we've prepared have evolved. And so the idea being, like, I can see the draft in front of me says that I provide an email address and I'll consent to receive your communications. That's not something that would have been in previous internal agreements, but they have evolved. So it might be an opportunity to try and bring something in and upgrade your internal agreement a little bit and make it more suitable. But no, you don't need an all singing or dancing new agreement necessarily, but you might need something to bolt on and just say that you're going to do this as well. So yeah, I think that's it from me.
Thank you very much. That's absolutely Great, Sam. There's lots of questions been coming in. I know Sam unfortunately has to go. She's got another commitment in about 10 minutes time, and we will be collecting questions as we go, and Sam will get back to people. We've got there's some particular questions about jointly and severally liable for delivery. Yes, that is the case. It's a collective agreement, and that will be in the internal agreement. But this is, remember, there are no land management actions in this scheme. It is a very different to a higher level stewardship or a countryside stewardship scheme. So I don't know whether you want to add anything to that, Sam, before you go.
No, just that I'd agree, and that although, yeah, I think lots of people think of their internal agreements, and I know some of the ones that we've created are very long, very sort of not convoluted, because they're brilliantly drafted, obviously. But this, what we've tried to create in the precedent, or what we're trying to create, is something that's much more concise and sort of user friendly. And hopefully that'll sort of follow through. And when people see it and can use it, it is something that's usable, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll have highlights, like square brackets where you need to fill it in, and they'll be highlighted. We'll have the schedules of the bit that you add in your own information, and we will have guidance notes to go with it. But as Sam says, there will be a health warning on it that if you need to take your own advice. But Defra didn't feel it was appropriate for them to provide a template, so this is something where we're providing so that it will be available for use. And I'm sure Sam doesn't want to be producing these agreements anyway for thousands of comments. So good. Well, Sam, thank you very much. We're going to now, lovely to have you with us, and we look forward to continuing working with you throughout the test and trial, and hopefully have you back later. I'd now like to invite Dan Geerah to join us. So Dan is Partnerships Manager at the Land app, and I've been a big fan of the Land app ever since the beginning of lockdown, when they had some of the first webinars. Dan previously has worked with FWAG. He's very practical. He's used to doing things in the field as well as being techie. And so they were our natural partner. They're a community interest company, and it's lovely to have you with us, Dan. So I think you're going to take us through the digital tool that we're preparing, because what the purpose of the test and trial is to see whether digital tools are practical and usable compared to using a large spreadsheet in the field or a clipboard with paper that gets wet or other sorts of things. So we're moving away from tracing paper and clipboards to smartphones. Over to you, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Julia, and thank you all for joining. So yeah, I'm Dan, I'm from the Land app, and yeah, we're very grateful to be both invited and now involved with the Foundation for Common Land Sustainable Farm Incentive with the technical support, really. I'm just going to spend 10 minutes or so talking through what we've done up to now and expectations for year 1, year 2 and year 3. So the main objective from our perspective was to try and save everyone who's involved in the surveying element of the trial, both time and trying to bring the trial some consistency. There's 4 main objectives that we're focusing on. Firstly was to auto-generate the locations of the surveying. So there's guidance provided by Defra that you want to survey 1 point in 10 hectares once a year for 3 years. 3 random points. So we've generated a bit of an algorithm on that, which I can demo. We're then also providing a mobile app for you to complete a survey form. This is, innovating for us as well. It's not something that the Land app has done up to this point, so it's quite exciting to get involved with the more surveying element rather than just land management. We're also really focusing on removing the need for any post-survey admin. I, as Julia has mentioned, have been out in the field for a number of years, and when you finish a survey, the last thing you want to do when you're cold and wet is to, type up notes or do any post-survey admin. We're hoping to try and reduce, if not eliminate, any admin other than a sync button. And then the 4th element that we're going to be providing some tech support on is just collating photo evidence as well. So as part of the process, not only are you surveying the moorland, you're also collating photo evidence as you go, just in case we need to look back at any and query any points that you've made. So yeah, hopefully saving time and bringing consistency. So the proof of concept that we've built up to now, firstly, is we've built this auto generation of survey points. The facilitators for each of the common have defined a survey area on the Land app. That survey area has then been split into a number of different survey units. In this case, Brantfell is in 6 different units, site A through F. And then what we've done is we've built an algorithm to take that data, to firstly overlay it with a grid of 10 hectare squares, and then drop a random point in each of those 10 hectare squares to define your survey areas. The output of that then breaks down obviously each of those surveying areas into their own layer. So if you are volunteering or getting involved with the surveying, you have your own layer to edit. Just make sure you're engaging with your facilitator of which site or which area of the moor you are surveying. But you can see that site A has been broken down into 30 or so points, each covering a 10 hectare block. Next year, when we rerun the algorithm, the random point will be in the same 10 hectare square, but it might be in a different location. We're hoping that will just speed up the initial pre-survey process. What we then have done is we've then created a mobile app template. We're temporarily using a third-party app called Mergin, which I'm just about to download, but we are in the process of building a mobile app version of Land App. There will be elements of the guidance that I just about to show you that does use the Land App mobile app, and it is actually an exclusive. This is the first time we've actually shared anything on the mobile app publicly, so that's quite exciting. As a note, everything I show you today, we have typed up written guidance that will be shared with everyone who's getting involved. We're also hosting the video guidance for the survey form and video guidance for the photo evidence app that you can access and will be shared afterwards. So I'm hoping technically my video should load. That seems to be playing well. One thing I might need to do, Julia, 2 seconds.
That's okay, Dan. I think Dan's still there. He's just focusing. Oh, you put yourself on mute, Dan, if you were talking to us. Anyway, I think he's just getting it working. It was working earlier.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I was sharing my computer sound. There we are. We did a practice run and it still didn't land. So just to recap on what I was just saying, basically, first app that we're using for a survey form is available on both App Store by Apple and Google. We've got video guidance for where you can download that from. And what it looks like once it's on your phone is hopefully displaying on your screen now. So like I said, we're using a third-party app for year 1 for the actual survey form. Once you log in and you're provided by our facilitators with a username and password, you will hopefully see on your app the map relevant to your common. So for example, in the demo, I'm logging into the Brant Common account. Once I log into Brant Common, I will see any map shared with me should be relevant to Brant Common. So clicking the shared with me button, I can see I've got Brantfell as a map. Once I open that map, what you should be able to see is all those different survey points that I just showed on the screen, each color-coded per survey site. So for accessibility, what we've done is we've made sure that it's clear to you, the surveyor, which of these is relevant to you. I'm going to be focusing in a moment on the northwest on site A that I was showing earlier, are the green dots. Each of these dots represent a survey site that you have to walk to on the moorland. Each of those are already pre-populated with some information. So if I click on a point, it's say in the middle over here, what that does is that loads up a bit of information about that survey point, the unique point ID, the name of the file that I'm editing, and also a national grid reference number as well. So if TECL fails, and as Julia mentioned at the start, this is a test, this isn't production ready, so to speak, but there is a grid reference number if you do need to get to it manually using a map, or need to share the information of maybe the points you haven't managed to edit. Just jumping through a little bit, what you can do is I think that bit was just showing you how you can navigate to a point, but I was quite far away. Once you open up the form, we've created a pre-populated list of all the different questions that you have to answer for every survey point. All of them start by asking you the soil type. So in the demo, I've just clicked peat, and depending on which soil type you choose will impact what questions you have to ask. So by auto filtering on your behalf, when you choose the soil, you're not then having to skip over any questions that may appear. So I've chose shallow peat. I therefore have to work my way through the survey form, answering the questions on ground cover, the extent of erosion, and other different questions that have been predefined by Defra under the SFI Moorland. As we're being the technical lead, we will make sure that all the questions are maintained up to date. Obviously, through iterations, things may change, but we will ensure that before you go on your survey, this form is as up to date as you need it to be. And hopefully you can see it's relatively easy to click on a box, choose from 3 options, which ones are relevant to your point, and fill out the form for each of those areas. Just as a note, we've got this section for user initials. So I'm putting in my initials of DG, just to, if we need to look at who filled in that form. And we've also got this final question for reason for moving point as well. So if there's any chance that you're on a survey and maybe there's a hazard, maybe it's down a deep ravine or a gully, you can move the location of your survey point by hitting this edit geometry button at the bottom of the screen. And what that should do is open up, I think it's just about to come onto it now, is give you the ability to change the location of where you're surveying. So please don't feel obliged to, climb down a ravine to go survey that point. If you feel you need to move it, please do move the point. Just make sure you fill out on the form the reason that you did move that point, which I think I'm going to demo in the video. So that's us completing the initial survey form. So every point on the moor, every 10 hectares has all those questions answered. You hit save once you're happy with the point. And the final thing to note is once you've completed that survey, the color of the point always reverts to this blue. So regardless of what color you started with, all of your points will finish as blue. And the objective as a team is to try and turn all the points from multicolored into our consistent blue. And that just allows the facilitator to, regularly keep track of who's completed what and what points might still need to be surveyed. The final video just to quickly show is that for each of the points that you survey, you also have to take photo evidence. This is going to be the first use of the land app out in the wild, so to speak. So it is going to be a separate app for year 1. Exactly the same principle where you need to download an app from the App Store. You will be provided a login from the facilitators. So just check with your facilitators what that login details are. And exactly the same premise, you'll load up your map, log into the land app, and you should be able to, once you log in, see a map that you can add photos to. So hopefully in this demo, I'm going to quickly log in. Once you're there, you're met in a very similar style to a satellite map. Obviously, in my case, I'm down in Bristol, not up in Brantfell. But you can, from there, directly either draw and measure some shapes, or as I'm just about to do in this demo, is click the plus button, take a photo, aim your camera at the peat or the moorland that you've just been describing. In my case, it's my back window in the demo. And then once you've taken that photo, you can add a description within the land app and submit. Both the survey form and the land app form will work offline. So if you are offline, you've got no signal, absolutely fine, complete the survey. And both of them, as soon as you go back onto Wi-Fi, should automatically synchronize. If not, within the guidance, we can show you how to synchronize that data. So when you get home, kettle's on, make sure you've synced both land app and your survey app, and that's all your surveying done. Thank you for listening. That's all me. Thanks, Julia.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. There's a lot to take in there, and as you can see, we're in this. We're developing this as we go along, and we're going to be testing this over the next 3-4 months. And the land app are developing their technology as things go along. So this is to give you a flavour of what the commoners on Brant, on Peter Tavy and on the Longmynd are going to be doing. Once we've got it all up and running, then you won't need a local facilitator to do it. You can sign up through your association, and we'll have instructions how to set it up and log in when they're done. Is that right?
Yes, exactly correct. So what we're doing, especially in year one, basically there's one account that you log into, everyone. We will do all the management of that. Any technical issues, I'm here to help, and there's a couple of our team that are here to help as well.
Yeah. So yes, and there has been a comment about algorithms and things like that. Yeah, we have been looking at this quite carefully, and that's something we're checking, and I can get Dan to perhaps respond directly to you, Gwyn, but it's something we've been looking at to make sure we don't get too many points, that there will be 1 point per 10 hectares, because it's something that was picked up a week or two ago.
Yeah, so yeah, we can basically add buffers, exclusion zones when we drop the points. I think Tracy, you picked that up as well during the trial. Yeah. Definitely for year two, we can make those improvements. But for year one, we've fixed the points now, but you can manually change them before you survey if you so wish. Just let us know you've done them. But yeah, Gwyn, very good point, and maybe we can talk tech offline. Yeah,
thank you. Okay, well, we'd now like to I'd now like to introduce Louise, and then we've got Tracy. So Louise and Tracy are here, and Louise is the facilitator for the Longmynd. Louise is a land agent with Halls, and Tracy is a commoner and an independent consultant based in Dartmoor. So welcome to both of you, and I'll let you, I'm not sure who's going first, but you're going to say a little bit about those two commons, aren't you? And then we're going to have a conversation with bring in Tom from the Longmynd and Colin from Peter Tavy. So over to you.
Hi, can you all hear me? I think I'm starting. Yes, so I'm Tracy May. I'm facilitator for Peter Tavy Common, which is on the western side of Dartmoor. I should have some slides being shared. Right, so it's Peter Tavy Common. It's just over 1,100 hectares in size. 11% of it falls within the North Dartmoor SSI, which is currently in unfavourable recovering condition. 27% of it falls within the Merivale Geological SSI, which is in favourable condition. The main habitat types found on the common are blanket bog, upland heath, acid grassland and valley mire, which are home to birds like snipe, wheatear and skylark. There's also various butterflies, damsel and dragonflies, as well as hare and otter. It's also very important for its abundant archaeology, with 460 sites that are recorded on the Historic Environment Record, of which 63 are scheduled monuments. There is open access across the whole of the common, although about 30% is used as a training area by the Ministry of Defence for live firing, which restricts all access to non-firing times only. It's owned by the Duchy of Cornwall. There's an active Commoners Association that is signed into an HLS agreement that actually comes to an end next year. This sets the current stocking rate on the common. There are 16 active graziers who graze cattle, sheep and ponies, and 19 non-graziers. So I hope that gives you a flavour of Peter Tavy Common.
Thanks a lot, Tracy. So now Louise is going to introduce the Longmynd.
Yeah, hi, good evening. My name's Louise Priest. I'm the local facilitator facilitating the test and trial on the Longmynd in Shropshire, and also representing the Longmynd this evening is Tom Lloyd, who is the secretary of the Longmynd Commoners Association. So firstly, an introduction to the Longmynd itself. The Longmynd lies to the west of Church Stretton in South Shropshire and comprises of an extensive upland plateau, as you can see on the photograph, nearly 5,500 acres of which is common land. The hill is quite an amazing feature of the landscape in South Shropshire, and is actually a very important feature of the landscape, with many surveys having found that the Longmynd is of exceptional importance for a variety of flora and fauna, several of which are nationally rare or scarce, and for this reason the hill is designated as a SSI. The common is grazed by sheep and ponies belonging to active graziers of the Longmynd Commoners Association, and being a forward-thinking bunch, they've agreed to take part in the SFI Moorland standard test and trial, which for the next few months will run alongside their existing uplands entry level and higher level stewardship scheme. So far on the Longmynd, as part of the test and trial, we've contacted all those with a legal interest in the common according to the official Commons Register. Viv has already touched on the fact that there are 254 entries on the official register, though according to the register only 129 of those are valid. In actual fact, so many of the names have changed, land has been developed, and that results in there being far fewer valid entries. And as we're steadily finding out through the live register process, and that will be commonplace for many commons, I'm sure. We are yet to start our survey of the hill, which needs to, or we're aiming to complete it before the end of the year. So that's going to start soon, and then we will be looking forward to seeing what public goods the hill currently delivers, how they can be maintained, restored or enhanced, and giving our feedback on the Moorland standard to the FCL and to Defra. So that's just a little bit about the Longmynd, and I think Tom, who is the secretary of the association, and Colin, they're here, and they're going to join Tracy and I just now to answer a couple of questions about the test and trial so far. Oh, there we go. Tracy and I are going to quiz Tom and Colin on their thoughts of the test and trial so far. So we'll start with you, Tom, if we can.
Okay.
Why has the Longmynd agreed to take part in the test and trial?
Yeah, well, I think we felt we were able to participate here on the Longmynd, mainly because a number of the active graziers were already expressing an interest in how we'd fare under the new agri support schemes as they're phased in. So, I mean, we also feel pretty lucky here that we've got a close-knit group of active graziers who, by and large, work very well together. And traditional hefted hill flocks are still very much the main focus of the farming system. So by entering the test and trial, we hopefully feel we're able to assess the impact that the SFI will have on the traditional commoning element and the collaboration we have with the other grazers, which we feel is important and probably is still our utmost priority. So hopefully we can get some reassurance before entering into a more fixed 3-year term. That's why we were happy to sort of join in.
Yeah.
Okay, so Colin, why has Peter Tavy agreed to take part in the test and trial?
Well, exactly what Tom said, really, and also, you know, having been involved in environmental schemes on Dartmoor for the last 30 years, I thought it would be advantageous for the association to actually have an input on how this scheme operates. Peter Tavy has had human activity on it for the last 4,000 years, and I would, you know, like that to continue in some shape or form, but especially grazing. So hopefully having an input out of the scheme ends up, it should be advantageous for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. And then back to Tom. What do you as a commoner and the association as a whole hope to get out of the test and trial?
Well, I think we probably both as a commoner and the association, I think we're probably hoping for the same things really. I mean, it's great that we have the opportunity to iron out some of the pitfalls that we'll probably encounter. And again, so that we can really potentially enter an SFI agreement with some reassurances that it will work for our common. And I mean, I was sort of hoping that as well that in addition to being familiar with the surveying and the administration side of things, we will hopefully have a workable method outlined for the distribution of funds amongst the participants. So hopefully one that will certainly work here on Longmynd and would be a viable model for others to replicate successfully when their time comes.
Okay, thank you. So, Colin, I'll ask you the same question as well. So what do you as a commoner and the association as a whole hope to get out of the test and trial?
I suppose to fully understand what the common has to offer, the public goods that's out there. Having been born and raised in Peterdivi, I could say I take the common for granted. So it's always going to be there. But to understand what everyone else sees, what Peterdivi has to offer, that can only be a good thing. And if we can enhance it going forward, then everybody should gain from that, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. And so following that, when you're actually doing the surveying, do you think it's important for the commoners to do the surveying themselves?
Well, yeah, Peterdivi has had quite a few surveys over the years done by so-called experts, and commoners have been reluctant to believe them. So any knowledge gained will only empower the commoners going forward. I've been involved in a couple of environmental courses, and also certainly members of an association of mine has done some training as well to identify species of plants, which hasn't been a requirement, but they've done monitoring on the common, and it just increases their knowledge of what's under their feet rather than just looking at the stock. So any work that does surveying does enhance the power of the commoners.
Thank you. So would you like to comment on that at all, Tom?
No, I think I should probably agree wholeheartedly that I think it probably is very important that the commoners get a chance to take part in the surveying, because we're in the same boat. Really, we've had a lot of information offered to us. We've had surveys done around here in the past, and again, commoners are reluctant to actually believe what we see on the map sometimes. We've had opportunities to ground truth some of the stuff that we've seen and haven't always agreed with it. So I think it will be really great to be included and with it from the start, really. Yeah.
Good. Thank you both. We're ready to pass back to Julia, if Julia's ready.
Thanks very much. And thanks, Colin and Tom and Louise and Tracy. And I think there's, what's at the heart of what we're trying to achieve here is to empower those who are managing common land, whether they're the commoners and also the owners, whether they're tenants who farm on common land as well, to make sure that people are fully engaged and understand the public goods. So commoners are up there every day, owners, maybe they're themselves or through their keepers, but it's really important that we're looking at the end of the telescope from the people who are going to be paying for the public goods. And that's what Colin and Tom were saying, that if they understand and they've been involved in the survey, as some of you will know, I say that data is knowledge is power, and sometimes one can convert that into money. So where everyone is running a business, and it's really important that we see that public goods are properly paid for and properly rewarded, and understanding what you have to offer is at the centre of that. So I'd now like to run our second poll. So if we could have the second poll launched, that would be great. So we're very much through this webinar trying to get a feel for what would be really useful to you if you're going to be participating in the SFI. So we're going to be making a whole lot of resources available. This includes guidance notes, the digital tools, the species identification, draft scheme documents, video demonstrations, and further webinars. So I think you're able to click more than one. It's a multiple choice. You may be able to click up to 3. So please do answer this, because this will help shape what we provide through our test and trial. It's also really important feedback to Defra. I should add that we're working really closely with Defra and Natural England and the Rural Payments Agency. So throughout this test and trial, we have been working very closely with them. So Natural England have produced some resources, and those are the basis for the digital tools that we've been producing. For instance, they also produce some species identification aids, and we've tested those with commoners, and they've asked for to have more photos available. I think those would be useful. So hopefully by the time everyone else is getting to do the SFI Moorland, we'll have improved resources there. Excellent. So we're getting lots of feedback here. With the video demonstrations, as has been said by Dan, there will be very short little video clips available providing guidance on the different ways of doing it. I find them really easy to use, the land up videos. They're usually about 2 minutes long. There's it's very reassuring, the way they take you through that. And I've sort of felt, having listened to it, I can do it too, having never used GIS systems before. Okay, I think we will, should we now close that poll? I think we've got most people have answered that. So yeah, the guidance notes, the digital tools have come out as the most popular. So that's great. Excellent. Well, I hope you feel that those presentations are giving you a highlight. This is, as I say, we're only a couple of months into this test and trial. We will be having another webinar at the end where we will have tested everything and we'll be able to demonstrate it again. But we really wanted to share with you what we've done so far, and to make sure that you can see that SFI Moorland is an option for you. So if that's, we think it's practical. It's on commons where they're usually quite large. It's certainly going to be cost effective to do it. And we want to make it as simple as possible for commons associations to undertake the work themselves rather than bringing in expensive consultants. Someone said they didn't get the last poll. I don't know why, sorry about that. I think it's now being shared, hopefully the results of this one. So we've got a lot of questions that have come in, and so I'm now going to turn to the questions with that. So and the other thing that I should just say we are going to be having is we're going to be doing some face-to-face sessions in Dartmoor, Shropshire and the Lakes. So for neighbouring commons to those undertaking the test and trial, so people will be able to come onto a common and test out the digital tools and look at what's being done as well. So I'm going to, we've got quite a lot of open questions here. So the most popular one so far is from John Rowland. It says, if an existing agreement is just for active graziers, can non-graziers be added into it? The key is that if you have an existing HLS scheme, which is, or a countryside stewardship scheme, which is just for active graziers, the SFI can include additional people because it's separate from the HLS agreement. So if you wanted to have other people who've to be involved, it's up to you to choose how you split the money up between people. We would expect people to be, the normal thing, people to be actively participating and contributing, but it's really, that's a decision for the association to say this, to how they include people within that agreement and how they contribute. The other thing I should add is that we're recommending that the money is given out to people by actively participating in the SFI. Some people will be doing the surveying and paid directly for doing that, and we're testing this at £30 per point. So the commoners will be on the road testing will be paid £30 per point. The other thing is that we would expect people to come to a meeting. So you don't get the money for doing nothing. You need to engage with the process, because it's not just the surveying, it's also identifying the public goods and looking at opportunities. So we've suggested that you may want to include a condition that you only get money if you come to so many meetings during the 3 years, so that you actively engage with the process of identifying and looking at public goods. So it's not money, for nothing. So I hope, John, that's asked your question. So it's, as I say, up to the association. Some people within their existing agreements already pay non-graziers. It depends on what you've chosen to do. So the next question here is, how does it work if common land parcel references are not visible on the SBI of the claiming entity for the SFI on the RPA online platform? Dan, I mean, you're familiar with this. Would you like to explain how, on using the Land app, we're getting the parcel data?
Yeah, thanks, Julia. And yeah, happy to do so. So we're not actually using the SBI directly for getting the parcel data. We're using the Section 4 registered common land boundaries to get the initial polygon that we then run through the algorithm as described. But because it's all geospatial, if we then need to retrospectively join it to an SBI numbers parcel data, we can do. But what that means is no one's blocked if, for example, the SBI number doesn't truly reflect the common boundary, or vice versa. So it's geospatial data based on the Section 4 registered land, but we can and probably will retrospectively bind it to the RPA's SBI download as and when we need to, because it's just geospatial. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, we have been working closely with the RPA, and they are seeking to release the data. It's something that we've been working with throughout our previous test and trial, and unfortunately, with all the changes going on with new schemes, the RPA haven't managed to provide it downloadable as an SBI, because you can do that with your home farm, can't you, Dan? But unfortunately not yet for commons. But it's work in progress, and we have this workaround. So every common has what's called a common land unit, and that information is available. So if your common is made up of several common land units, you can include that. If, for instance, you're only part of a common land unit, you would be able to then, once you downloaded that, to split that, wouldn't you, Dan? So you wouldn't have to use the whole of that area.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So you trying to be as hyper flexible as we want to be. When we do get the point generator into the Land app, any polygon you can run it through it, even if you drew a square. But yeah, at the moment, all of the maps within the survey apps have been using those common land units through the Section 4 registered common land.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much, Dan. That's great. So the next question is around SFI continue without the owner. I mean, the role of the owner is really varies enormously from common to common. So there are HLS and countryside stewardship agreements that work without the owner. Then there are others where the owner is absolutely integral to the delivery of the scheme. And we expect it to be the same with the SFI. So if you're already working closely with the owner, we would hope that the owner is going to be engaged as well, and it may well be that some of the surveying will be undertaken. It may be that a keeper or somebody would want to participate in that too. In terms of the legal situation, where nobody has to take any soil samples, so we're simply using, it's a bit like having a walking stick, or we're going to be testing. We've got these special electric fence posts that that Tracy has trialed in Dartmoor, and we will be using those. So it's simply looking, it's not a long depth. You only have to look, is it over 40 centimeters or not? So it's really whether the peat is deep peat or not, or shallow or not there at all. So no cores have to be taken out. So I hope that, Phil, answers your question there. Next question is from Andrew Rothwell. So do all registered commoners on a common need to be on board with the application? Viv, I don't know whether you're very busy with the live register and doing this. The way we're working is that we have to communicate with people, but we don't have to, people don't all need to participate. So everyone needs to be informed. Is that what the approach that we're taking, isn't it? Do you want to add into that?
Yeah, well, that certainly is the approach at Brand. We had a meeting last week where, although there are 66 signatories to the, 66 people on the live register, about 20 people turned up to the meeting. We invited everybody to the meeting. Some people said they couldn't come, and we didn't hear from some. But the idea is that everybody has to be informed, and we're working with, I suppose, we're working with the willing, really. And as long as I understand, as long as everyone knows that it's going on, we're fine.
Yeah, so it's not, because there are no land management actions, then there's people who, non-participants, can't disrupt the scheme, isn't it? That's the approach. But so there's no attempt to exclude people, but it's about active engagement there.
Yes, and any future meetings we have, we'll go back and invite the 66 people. And if they turn up, that's great. And if they don't, well, at least they know about it. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Tracy or Louise, would you like to add any comments around that level of, the engagement and the approach you're taking there?
Yeah, Tracy here. On Dartmoor, as Viv mentioned, we actually have live registers held by the Dartmoor Commoners Council. So it did make it simpler, but we have as well written to everybody who's on the register, and we've had a meeting where we sent out letters to 35 people with registers rights. And at our meeting we had earlier in the week, we had 8 commoners come to the meeting. So it's a lot of people don't come to the meetings, but we will continue to try and engage with anyone who wishes to be involved.
Yeah, I think one thing I know, Tracy, you're familiar with is that with the Land App, you have the mobile app for collecting the data, but then you view it all on the computer, don't you? And you're able to share that with as many people as you like. So all the commoners can be, if they give their email address or whatever, people can view and engage with the data once collected. So it's quite an attractive platform for that sharing of information, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's really great that everybody can have access to it. Then you're not all trying to get together and pore over a map on a table and talk to people about it. Everyone can in their own time go onto it and access it. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Louise, did you want to add anything else with the sort of levels of engagement and things in the Longmynd?
Yeah, well, I only say I agree with Tracy, really. The active graziers on the Longmynd are quite a forward-thinking group of people. They're keen to participate. So yeah, we're slightly behind Bramfell and Peter Tavy in terms of meeting and sussing out the survey, but we'll be doing that shortly.
Great, and they do meet fairly actively anyway. They're one. Yeah. Very engaged with the Our Upland Commons project that we're doing as well, aren't they? So there's lots of work going on at different levels, and they had an active association for a long time, haven't they? So as Tom said, that's great, excellent. Thank you very much. And now moving on to the sort of legal side of things, we have a question from Claire Foster. Really good point, this, Claire. When intermediate and advanced levels are added in the future, which may recommend land management options, presumably internal agreements will need revising again. Thanks. So the SFI introductory standard is only for 3 years, and we're not expecting it to be renewed or extended because it's collecting survey data. You do need to undertake the SFI Moorland introductory standard to go into the higher level. So it's really important that people apply for this so that then they're going to be and do this work, and then they can go into the intermediate and advanced levels. But if you were to apply this year, for instance, and you've already got a countryside stewardship or a high level stewardship running, you don't need to future-proof against those higher tiers because we're already being paid for stock management options under CS. You're not then going to be paid for them again under the SFI intermediate. So we're trying to keep this really simple. We have discussed that, the pros and cons of making it expandable. But at the moment, because it's going to be a self-service short contract agreement, our recommendation is that we keep it straightforward. Otherwise it would, and that then, because a lot of people, if they have a CS agreement or an HLS agreement already, it wouldn't be appropriate to make it expandable. And if they don't, then we're trying to make it as simple as possible and then move things once they go into another agreement. Because if you go into a more complicated agreement, which has, for instance, it might require bracken management, it might require burning, or it might require not burning, or it might require doing peat restoration works or stock reductions, then that's a whole different level of agreement. And at that point, we would be recommending people have a deed. They're likely to be 10-year agreements, and at that point, legal advice would be required. So that's where we are. So these would be a time-limited 3-year agreement. Thanks, Claire. Moving on, another question from John, another good question, John. If an association covers multiple commas, does each comma need to apply separately? No, you can, the way that when you go on, you can apply for all 3 together. And we've had a trial run with the RPA portal, and you can put several CL units together. So it will be the units linked to your SBI. So when you go on to the rural payments portal, you will be able to see, to apply for SFI, you will be able to see maps of your common land units. They're not yet downloadable, but you will be able to see them on the SFI portal. If anyone's applied for SFI yet so far, they will know that you can click on different field parcels, and you will be able to click on different CL land units. So that's something that we can, you can effectively match it to your current scheme. That's what the plan is with that. What if the registered graziers differ, was a sort of sub question to that. That's not relevant. It's the land that's going in. If you've got different, it is quite often you will have different graziers on those different CL units. Then you need to write to everybody on each of the common land units. So you would have then 3, if there were 3 common CL units, you would have 3 live registers and write to everybody. That again is quite common. I've got an assistant at the moment working on one where he's got 12 different CL units going on, and he's busy creating the live registers for all of those, because there are lots of little CL units. And everyone needs to be written to. The great thing about doing the live register is that a lot of commons haven't updated their registers from, they were in ESA and then they were in an HLS and a HLS UELS, and it's gone on for 25, 30 years and nobody's really updated things. So it's important to get the governance, because, you know, effectively the rights are linked to the money, and it's important that we understand, you know, who has rights. Do they have management control of those rights? Do they have them for a long enough duration? And informal arrangements where previously, you know, you paid a bottle of whiskey in New Year for your rights, those unfortunately aren't really appropriate when people are receiving public money. Do we have to survey the whole common each year? You have to survey 1 point every 10 hectares each year. So if the common is 1,000 hectares, you need to do 100 survey points. And the next year you do another 100 survey points, and third year you do another 100 survey points. And you will do 3 points within a 10 hectare space. And the Land Up are generating those 3 sets of points. So this year for us, they're generating the first year. So you would effectively have a year 1 layer, a year 2 layer, and a year 3 layer. So yes, it is effective. By the end, you will have 3 points per 10 hectares. And we've got various algorithms to make sure they're not on top of each other and they're not too close. We've got sort of buffer zones around each of those 10 hectares. We've got, oh, it's all changing. How do we work out the distribution of the money, especially those with those commons who have people with commoning rights who don't actively play a part in the management of hill, or even farmers? every common is different, and I've, with HLS, I think I put 45 different commons associations, help them facilitate entering into their HLS, and every common comes up with a different approach to how they split their money. And as I said, this is called the Sustainable Farming Incentive. It is money for the active management of the commons. It's particularly targeted the SFI at the moment at BPS claimants. If a common is, if people haven't been actively involved, then they may wish to become actively involved in the future, but it is about engagement, and how you decide to give that money out will depend. So for instance, sometimes, as I said earlier, the money only goes to active graziers. Sometimes the non-active graziers get money as well. Sometimes the money is just divided by rights. Sometimes it's divided by people's historical grazing levels. So I'm not going to say there isn't a particular formula. On one common, they said, well, we're just going to divide it per person because we feel people are putting in the effort rather than by right. So that is something that you need to work out as an association. And that's something other people might say, well, we're going to actually not give out a huge amount of this money, but we're going to keep it as a sort of some of it for a fund for our going into future schemes. So that's, it's up to you what you do, but you do need to clarify in your internal agreements how you're giving the money out. That needs to be transparent, and you need to produce accounts that everybody can look at. So it's really important. This is public money for public goods, and it's important that you can account for how you use that money. And we'd always recommend that people have independent bookkeepers who look at their accounts each year. Andrew's quite right in saying Defra won't grasp that particular nettle, and we are testing out different methods. So it's likely that Brant, Peter Tovey and the Longmynd will come up with different approaches. I don't know, Tracy or Viv or Louise, whether you've had any of that discussion yet, and whether you'd like to add in anything there.
That discussion is yet to come. Okay. On the Longmynd, actually.
Yeah.
Same on Peter Tovey.
It'll be an interesting one.
Yeah. So we've got, in terms of the questions, gosh, we've got like 22 questions. This is we're gonna have to keep all of these. Let me look to see ones that Dan, there's one for you here. Does the system allow the input of existing information, e.g. peat depths, vegetation, etc., from previous national park surveys?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of questions on that point. Technically, it does. For what we've done at the moment, it doesn't include them, but I think these are the types of feedback points that we want to collate. So the moment you're kind of going in and you tell us the peat depth, we could technically pre-populate that and you go and check whether we're right or wrong. But no, I think all of this, just make it as feedback. Who knows what we can add to year 2, but at the moment the survey form is empty, but we can append any data that you might have. I know there's some other points around National Trust data, etc.
We can upload data, can't we? We can upload these layers.
Correct, yeah. So once it's on the land app, you can upload your own overlays. So if you've got any data on existing surveying or soil types, etc., you can upload those onto land app and compare. Yep. So
if the national park or the National Trust or another landowner is using a separate, like ArcInfo or something else, that doesn't matter. You can export the files, the shape files, and import them into the land app.
Yeah, exactly. So it works both ways. If you want to move data from land app into Arc, you can. Or if you want to move data from Arc into land app, you can as well. So it's the data is just a format that you can move it wherever you so wish. But yeah, all of these little points around speeding up your time, I think, are valid. And yeah, hopefully we can be helpful in year 1 and 2 and 3.
Yeah. Key question here is, when can we apply and start receiving the money? From John. Hey, John, good to have you joining us. Where you can apply, at the moment. So ring up the RPA. But they're probably not open at the moment. But you can send them an email this evening and say that you're authorised for your association. So you can apply now. They're releasing in batches when people can apply, but it's really important to get started. So you need to start doing your live register. And we've got some tools available already on our website for that. You need to start getting an internal agreement together, and we are finalizing this shortly. We're working on that, and then you can apply. But you first need to get a pack released. So anybody who wants to apply, your step one is to get a pack released. So contact the RPA and ask for a pack, because they're not automatically there for Commons. And your money is paid quarterly. So once you've been accepted, so say you got all your documentation together and you were ready to actually do the formal application in, say, January, you might have a 1st of February start date, and then you would receive the money quarterly. March, April, May, you'd receive the money in May. So it's quarterly payments throughout the year. There is here, rumour indicates there's little interest in taking up the SFI. Is there any likelihood increasing it? The money is going to be fixed for the Moorland scheme. It was £6.45 a hectare. You may remember last November when I was giving talks about this a year ago. We have had it increased substantially as a result of making it clear that wasn't worthwhile. This is different from the other SFI schemes where I know there has been little interest. Part of the road testing is looking for the value for money element. Our view at the moment is that it is definitely worth doing, and also this, you do require this data in order to go into other schemes, to the higher tiers of SFI, so you might as well be paid for collecting it. So there's how will the surveyor determine the soil type? You put a stick in the ground. So that's what you do. So there we're using electric fence posts. You can, Mark's asked what's the estimated timescale for being able to apply for SFI Moorland or in-by land. You can do that right now, I believe. So if you activate an SFI for your own farm, I think you can do that right now. There's a question that did come up earlier about facilitators, and this was Claire Foster. So many farmers applying on their own without a facilitator. Well, it'll be Commons associations applying, and this is why we're providing guidance, because we're working really hard to make sure what we're providing is compliant with what Defra are asking people to do. Now, it's clearly people need to make their own double check, but we are working, as Dan says, really hard to do that. The reason we're using facilitators is that literally this scheme doesn't exist at the moment, it's just being launched, and so it's really important that those associations who've been kind enough to participate are having that support. Now, we've had this final, it's now 9 o'clock. It's gone really quickly. I'm sorry we haven't been able to answer all the questions, but if you'd like to fill in the our final poll, and then we're going to be drawing the webinar to an end. So yes, we've got those final questions coming in. I think we did answer about jointly and severally liable. We've already answered that. The answer is yes, and it's like all other Commons agreements. The single entity takes the liability, and they share that liability through their internal agreement. We are now asking, will you be entering SFI Moorland? So from what you've heard this evening, are you considering entering SFI Moorland? Yes, no, not sure. We need more information to make a decision. And then the second question, so if you scroll down, the second question is with regard to the surveying, would you plan to do the work yourself within the Commoners Association, enlist external help, such as a contractor? I think there may, so that's so we've got there, we've had 75 people. I'd like to, just while that's finishing off, any final people answering that question, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to our speakers tonight, to Viv Lewis, Tracy May, Louise Priest, to Dan Geerah as well, to Sam McAlister, who's now left, to Tom Lloyd, and to Colin. And without the commoners associations, the commoners and the owners participating, we wouldn't have be running this test and trial. Also, our thanks to Defra for funding the test and trial. This arose out of my frustration with the previous iteration, and we're pleased that we're now working to make this a better scheme all round. So good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for your time. This will be available as a YouTube video on our YouTube channel. And so please, it will be emailed out to you. So do share it with your colleagues, friends and neighbours. So lovely and to see everybody, well, not to see everybody, but to have people on board. Thanks for all your content, sharing your views in the chat and on the questions. Say good evening. Please do look at our website for more information and for our Common Land Toolkit. We'll close the webinar now. Thanks a lot. Bye.